Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
So who killed the glamorous French entrepreneur Daniel Perrault? Nancy, do you know?
I can't tell because somebody will kill me if I tell.
I know. You never know what happens when you walk into a small town and take over or try to. Welcome to Big Blend Radio with Nancy and Lisa with a crazy mother-daughter travel team and publishers of Big Blend magazines. On today's show, author Suzanne-Schiffman is joining us to talk about her twisty new mystery novel, Between a Rock and a Dark Place. It's on Amazon, all those great places. But you can go right to her website. Go to suzanne-schiffman.com, and that's Suzanne, S-U-Z-A-N-N-E, Schiffman, S-H-I-F-F-M-A-N, SuzanneSchiffman.com. I'm just, proving that I can spell.
It's about time.
I know we have an author on the show. She may go, okay, red circle around that. But welcome, Suzanne. How are you?
Thank you. I am well. Thank you very much. This is a pleasure to be on your show.
It's great to have you here. Nancy and I love it when a good book comes in here. And before we started recording this, I'm like, she stole the book from me.
That's right.
Because there was a dead body. And I was, I'm like, there's a dead body. And I was all excited because you are incredible about getting attached to the character. You just immediately get attached to characters with you. And I was like, I'm in this. And Nancy's like, well, no, I'm reading it. She took it. But Nancy, you enjoyed this?
Oh, yeah.
I know. I had to keep trying to put masking tape over your mouth to not tell me everything.
There's several things that I really like about it. And I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but I am almost at the point where I think women write better mysteries than men.
Uh-oh.
I don't know if it's attention to detail or if it's about the pacing of something, how and when things occur. But, or maybe it's just a woman reading a book written by a woman, but I didn't look to see who wrote it before I started the book. So I'm going to rule that one out. But there is something about it. I think it's more about those little twists and turns that are character-based that I really love. And that's what I'm just starting. And I know there's a lot of great male authors with murder mysteries, and we know some, but there's a difference in how they write.
Yes, Suzanne.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I've often thought it's really, it's not a violent mystery, or not a violent murder mystery, and it's certainly not. Well, I mean, it is a page turner in a way, but not in the way that you want to, keep going with the violence of the actual action of the problem. But it's more, as you said, it's character driven. A lot of characters are introduced throughout the book. I mean, of course, the main character is dead in the beginning, but he's still a presence throughout the book because it's pretty much done in flashbacks. So that's what I was trying to do, just kind of make it kind of, like a la Agatha Christie, a whodunit. I mean, you just get to know these characters in a three-dimensional kind of way, and that's kind of what pushes the plot and the action forward instead of relying on, kind of too much violence or page turning or whatever.
Well, so that's calculating. Because, they always talk about how women poison men, I think that, but we know how to calculate and set things up and go, okay. And that's what I think it comes down to. It's about reading characters, that observancy of it. And men, if they're going to kill each other, they could just get the axe out, right? But most of the time women are poisoning or doing something like, hey, come over, and then here, I baked you this cake, and then they die.
It's on your honey-do list.
Yeah, there's just, we're calculating that way. And I think that's what it gets down to on the male versus female. But to me, initially, as soon as I got into the book, I'm like, you just dig into the characters. And I already immediately felt the sense of place. And I felt, Nancy and I've lived in different small towns, and I could identify with the characters immediately because, especially having been there, and the policeman, the sheriff, Spike You just automatically, I just felt like I was there. And Nancy, I think you felt that too, about the small town part of it.
Oh yeah, I could almost say what gas station the body was closest to, based on the town we used to live, where I could just like, oh, this could have been, there it is right there, and there's the 3 or 4 characters in the town. I'm like,
I know.
It's you and you and you and you.
I know. So why don't you give us the overview of the story, because I don't trust Nancy, and I didn't finish it because she will tell everybody at the end, so we can't.
Yeah, no telling of the ending.
Yeah, so tell everybody, like, because really it gets to, this Spike finds a body on the road. It's crazy.
Correct. Yes, in the very first, few pages of the book, a body is found by the sheriff late at night. Very strange. He's wrapped in a sleeping bag, and we very soon find out in the first chapter that it is a Frenchman who had come to the county, a very rural county, mind you, with very local people who are set in their ways. A Frenchman who wanted to kind of create, he wanted to start a restaurant and kind of create some, just really kind of bring this rural backwater area into the 21st century and make it a destination place for people from the city, which is not more than, it's about an hour and a half away, let's say. So this fellow, this Frenchman, his name is Daniel Perrault, thinks that by coming to the area, he will make a big difference and just sort of bring a lot to the county that it doesn't have now. So the question is, what happened? Why was this happening? Why is he found presumably murdered by the side of the road? And the question that the sheriff has to deal with is finding out what the personality of this fellow was and why he presumably rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. He got on somebody's bad side, and there are a few suspects, and something terrible happens, and that's how the book kind of progresses, with the sheriff kind of interviewing all these people who might have had something to do with his life, and we go from there, basically.
I'm glad you could pronounce his name for us.
He is French. I had to bring a Frenchman in.
There you go. Hey, why not? But that's the thing about living in a small town. And Nancy and I are very involved in the world of tourism, and it's really interesting because you want, like, a small town to keep its sense of place and, not be overrun with McDonald's or whatever. But I remember, this mountain town we lived in, the backwoods, right? And the backwoods, I love that. And people would come in from the city and open a bed and breakfast or a restaurant, and like people didn't even know him and automatically hated them for walking in. And, it's like, even if they've been there before and talked, and then one half of the town would accept it and then the other half wouldn't. And it's like, oh, we have this idea, and like, really, you need to get this. You need to do this kind of thing. And there was always like, it takes a long time for foreigners to get you're a foreigner if you come from a city, to get through to the backwoods people. You know what I mean? And the backwoods people don't want to accept that. They don't want to change. This is how we live.
Definitely. That's exactly right. I mean, the local people, and we're talking about, again, a very rural community, however, not that far from a city, but they're kind of set in their ways. There are a lot of people who have lived here for generations, and they like the way things are. They don't like the apple cart tossed over or whatever. And here we have not only someone from the city coming to kind of change things and tell them what is going to, be good for the county, but he's also foreign. So that's a double whammy. They don't like either of those things. But the main problem with this particular character is because our quote unquote protagonist is he kind of elbows his way in. He's a little bit aggressive. He's very brash. He rubs people the wrong way. I mean, other people come and start small businesses in rural communities, and they do fine. But this particular guy was a little bit too pushy and kind of went over the line. And, that once that happens, locals can turn against you. And, those up in the hollows kind of look askance at somebody kind of trying to change their community, even though they know it might be for the better. They just don't like to be pushed around too much. by someone who thinks he knows more than they do. So that's
well, we have
there.
been to Chamber of Commerce meetings where everybody's drinking whiskey, which is really fun. And later on, two people start hitting each other. It's like let's go outside with this. And it is exactly that. Someone coming in feeling that they need to not only make changes in the town or county or whichever, but they also need to bring these people into the 21st century.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And it doesn't work that way.
No.
Yeah,
they want things to stay just the way they are to a great extent, and although they're willing to accept a little bit, again, once the line is crossed, then they're gonna turn against you probably.
Yeah, we used to watch it and just sit back and giggle because it was pretty funny.
It's funny. It is interesting, and I want to go back to the character part too, because even when Sheriff Stryker or Spike, when he found the body, he was done for the day, and he knew the highway that he was driving on and the people that he was seeing before him. But what I thought was interesting was there was that balance between fear and excitement, right? And then having to do this and get the troops in kind of thing. But there was that fear. He had that. How often do they see a dead body on the side of the road? How often do you see that? And so you gave him that element of fear, because I think a lot of times that, like, even when you watch a movie, like, the cops don't have any fear. They just don't give them that fear factor. They're like invincible in a way. And I think that that's very unreal. I think policemen get nervous if they go to a domestic violence dispute, if they, you see a dead body, there's like, what is that? He didn't know what it was. But you gave him that little bit of an edge of like, uh-oh. know?
Yes, I mean, he had been, previous to running for sheriff in this particular rural county, he'd been in a neighboring town as a small town cop kind of thing. So he had moved back to this county and run for sheriff, and nothing like this had ever, happened here. And he's responsible, and he is nervous. He is concerned. He had a vague idea of who Danielle Perrault was, but not in depth. And he just knew what a very difficult investigation this was probably going to be, and he knew the whole county would be watching him. So he was I would say that's a good word. He was kind of excited about it. I mean, it was a picture. The press would be on him. The newspaper people would be coming to him for statements. But on the other hand, he was a little bit uncomfortable with all of this, to say the least.
Well, there's that kind of false sense of security, like we were told when we first moved to this one town, that, nobody locked their doors. I'm like, we're locking our doors. And there was, no, you don't need to. And we were like, oh, yeah, you do. And so I feel like there's that there's that sense of security. Everybody knows everybody. The town is small, and nobody's going to do anything like that. And then something does happen, and then you're like, oh, maybe we should lock our doors because it's just not.
And do we even have a key?
Yeah, can we get back in once we've locked our doors?
That's funny. It's funny how that works in smaller communities. Now, you live up in West Virginia, so that's a lot of the communities around there are like that. And in your travels, is there specific regions that kind of sparked your interest of the setting for Wayne County?
Well, the people are by and large either the original people are by and large either subsistence farmers or workers. I mean, they do various jobs, farming. Other than the subsistence farming, they do farming. They do low wage work. They're, as I think I said in the beginning of the book, a lot of the people came from. They're descendants of immigrants from Ireland and Wales who had come to work the mines. So they've been here for a long, long time, and again, set in their ways. But life is tough. I mean, there's not a lot of upward mobility. But again, they get by. They kind of like their way of life, and They just don't. They don't want to see too many changes that are going to disrupt the serenity that they think they have here.
And then there's the other characters, like you have a bipolar chef. That could be interesting. You know.
Well, there are the characters who are the suspects. Yes, they're all quite different, and some of them. I mean, I talk about the been heres and the come heres. So we have our been heres, as I said, our subsistence farmers and whatnot. But then we have our come heres, a few people who do try to come out and enjoy the beauty of the area. I mean, they're drawn to the beauty of the area because it is bucolic. It is in the mountains and quite lovely. So there are artists who come out, and that draws some people who want to cater to that. There are other restaurants other than the restaurant that our protagonist opens up, but they just don't know what's going to happen with being interviewed by the sheriff. They don't really know whether they really are suspects or, I mean, they all had something to do with our main character. They all had they all have love-hate relationship with him. I mean, the guy is French. He's very sexy. He's very attractive. He's even charismatic to a certain extent, but he has this terrible other side to him that creates this dichotomy where people adore him in one sense, but then they grow to hate him in other ways. So,
we know people like that too.
He has a lot of enemies.
It's like the women like him, so the men don't.
I know. And then eventually the women will dislike him. It happens. I wanted to ask what led you to this story and even writing, because I know One Fine Day is your previous book.
Yes.
Have you written other books that we should know about?
Not yet. I do have an idea for a third book. One Fine Day I wrote a couple of years ago, well, several years ago. It was published in 2011. Or self-published, really, and it's completely different. It takes place, it's a coming-of-age love story, which takes place in 1969. It also had a Frenchman in it. I had lived in France, so I kind of like having French people in my books, but it was kind of based on a composite of a lot of people, colorful people I knew back in those days. I mean, fictionalized, of course, but again, it's a love story, coming-of-age situation. Then after that, and I had taken several writing classes, and a couple of things happened out here in the rural area where I lived that kind of sparked my interest in maybe creating a murder mystery, because they were odd things, and they're in the book, fictionalized, but the two instances that happened are things that really did happen, but I sort of, kind of made them up and made them a lot more exciting than they really were. And then that kind of developed into the idea for a murder mystery. But of course, none of that ever really happened. It's all fiction, but things did occur that just kind of made me think that, well, this could be something. And I almost think maybe it needs a sequel, because there are a lot of people left hanging at the end that we don't really know what they're going to do next. So murder mysteries are fun. I mean, it was a lot of fun. The wife
going to France probably wants to come back.
Possibly.
Yeah, because she seems to have a lot of male people who like her in a brotherly fashion.
Oh, hello.
Yeah. She was sort of the opposite of our poor despicable protagonist. I mean, he's not a sympathetic protagonist, Daniel Perrault, and that's why he's dead. So, but his wife is sort of the opposite, and very lovely, and but what does she harbor, kind of thing. So it's possible there'll be a sequel.
Well, so with the characters being such strong parts of where you connect as a reader, and like you definitely have the sense of place in the book. You feel it. I mean, that's what Nancy and I were talking about. It's like, oh, this is like amazing in that way where you just, I think it's so important that you really connect from like the first few words of the book, and you feel like you're there. And next thing you know, it's 1 a.m. You're like, what am I doing? I need to go to sleep, and that's a good thing. But when you look at the characters, do you have like conversations as you're writing, or you're walking down the street and start talking to the characters, and people look at you and go like, "What is she doing?"
That's an interesting question. Some of the characters, I mean, most of the characters obviously are fictional, but they are based on composites of several different, each one is based on composites of several different people in a way. And I just sort of, you just sort of put yourself in the mindset of thinking, well, how would that person react to the sheriff asking these questions, and what are they going to reveal, and what are they going to hide? What is their how will their personality come out in a kind of a Q&A situation? And I just kind of got into their minds and tried to create, really interesting dialogue and make them into real 3D people, to kind of move the story along, because it is from many different perspectives. Each suspect kind of brings his or her own point of view as to what, Daniel Perrault's story was, and it just kind of went from there. I mean, they really are all very different people, and I just tried to build on that and create that.
And there's fear in that, in being a suspect. Even if you're innocent, there's fear in that. Like, you never know. Like, if you're being questioned, there's that sweat at the back of your neck, kind of like it's like going
they're
through.
all very defensive, very defensive.
Yeah.
They don't want to say anything that's going to, put them on Sheriff Spiker's trajectory as being arrested or being brought in for more severe questioning or whatever. So they're all very, very cautious with what they say. And they all say to the sheriff how much they actually did love the guy, at least initially, until things fell apart.
But, I mean, in this world today, as we live, and we see one prisoner after another released and all have been in prison for 25 years for something they didn't do, the idea that just because you're telling the truth doesn't mean you won't be accused and sent to prison doesn't wash anymore. I think, maybe 40, 50 years ago, people thought, as long as I'm telling the truth, nothing's going to happen. But I think today, a lot of people are looking back going, that's really not true. It is possible to be accused of something you didn't do, and it is possible to get convicted and go to prison, or even maybe, hung for it.
Exactly.
So I think anytime you're talking to law enforcement, especially about having hurt someone or murdered someone, you're going to be scared. If you're not, then you probably did it.
And especially since the sheriff is bound and determined to solve this case. I mean, he doesn't want this blot on his department or on his tenure as sheriff. He is really trying extremely hard to dig this out and make sure that this thing is brought to a close. So people are a little bit wary and uncomfortable about talking to him.
It moves very, very well. I like the pacing of it, because sometimes in the middle of a murder mystery and you're reading the book and you're all like, okay, let's get on with it. I like the pacing of this book, that I never felt like, well, come on, let's get to it. Let's get to it.
Good.
Or if it goes too fast.
Yeah, because there's a balance. Yeah, if it goes too fast, then it's like, what just happened here? Like you left something out. I'm not comfy with that. But I liked the pacing of it, where you had time to think about the characters, but it still moved. Not too fast.
Well, what was fun with it, and I actually had a big poster board, because the time frame is important in the book, because each suspect, as he or she is being interviewed, I mean, it is kind of a la Agatha Christie, but I had to make sure that whatever each character was saying would work, in the time frame and the chronology of what other characters were saying. I mean, there were seasons involved, and what happened when, and did that mesh with what one character one suspect was saying about the same time period, or is it going to get confusing for readers? But each chronicle had to blend in time and place with whatever other narratives were saying, to make sure the story flowed smoothly and moved forward, though, at the same time, because there was a lot of back and forth. I mean, we went backwards and forwards, but you still had to kind of feel like the story was shooting forward to get us where we wanted to go, kind of thing.
No, you did good. You did good.
Like writing music, you have to have the song flow with your melody and the rhythms,
Right.
And you can take people in different directions that they didn't expect the song to go, but you still got to bring them back into the flow,
Right,
and
yeah.
I really think there's a tie with that, But you did say blend, so you get extra points. So do you have a writing room? Do you go away to write? Like what's your setup? Do you listen to music? Do you drink wine? Do you like Frenchmen?
I have a little office, which has a great big round window that looks out onto a little Zen garden at my house in Virginia, and that's where I did most of the writing. I tend to put on soft music, usually classical, and just sort of try to, relax and stare out the window and then start to envision these people. So and it's, we're talking about a 2-year process. I mean, it takes a long time, and of course a lot of rewriting, and then you ask people to read it and they say, ooh, that doesn't work. And so you go back and redo
that was my favorite part.
Did you, when you start, did you go, okay, this is the plot. This is going to happen. It's going to be the person who did it. This is the person who's getting murdered.
I knew who was going to be murdered. I mean, that was he's the driving force through the murdered. The victim is the driving force through the book. But honestly, I did not decide on the killer until probably about 6 months into doing some of the writing. I had some ideas, but I completely changed my mind and rewrote.
This is interesting to me because I don't remember. We've interviewed so many authors, and every single one says at some point they may have, this is what I think I'm going to do, or their intention is to do this, but somewhere along the line a character takes over and everything changes.
Right. Yes. Well, I once remember reading John Grisham saying, make sure you know how it's going to end, and then you can write the book. Or maybe he said it the other way around. I don't know. But I absolutely did not know who the killer was going to be for about 6 months into the writing. So I had to figure out who despised Daniel Perrault the most, or had a motive, I guess.
I think it's about your character. Your character is developed, and you're like, oh, well, now he's got that personality, so we can make this happen. Oh, she's like that. Oh, which means that she could have this other talent. You know what I mean? It's like as you develop your characters,
it's interesting.
They become it's like playing God. I'm creating this person, and they can do this or that. So it's
and
kind
then when you change your mind, you have to go back and kind of do a lot of rewriting.
Oh wow! And was it different doing a crime fiction versus coming of age love story? Is the other one also very character driven? It's got to be if it's a love story, right? That's that internal, intimate thing, but side of things. But was it different for you?
Very different. Obviously, yes, as you say, it's a love story, so there are the two central protagonists, if you will. But I don't know if you guys were alive in 1969, but it was a crazy time, and there were a lot of very colorful people floating around. And so, again, with that book, it was fun creating these various. Well, the main character is Joanna, who's just a little bit on the crazy side and madly in love with this guy that she follows all over the place. And in the process, she meets and has interchanges with very weird and colorful people, I guess I should say. So it's different in that people come and go in that book. She comes across various very strange people. At least we consider them strange in those days, and even now they would be stranger. But they kind of come and go through the story. they come and go through the story until there's a denouement at the end with the actual relationship. So it's kind of a wild ride that she takes the readers on, really not knowing what she's doing, just a young girl that's kind of footloose and fancy free. And anyway, it's quite different, but again, there are lots of characters that are created that are very interesting to read about, I guess. But again, they're not. It's not a murder mystery like this one. They're not.
Now, have you gone to France? I've got to know about this.
Lived in France, yes. Lived in France, which is why I kind of thought using a French personality would be kind of interesting, because they're kind of different. They can be kind of arrogant and brash, especially when it comes to food. And that the guy was coming to create a culinary mecca, if you will, in this little rural county. So he had to be French. And I'd lived in France and kind of knew them as I knew the rural people here as well. So it was kind of a clash of cultures that to bring him into this area. So
there is something about an attitude for some people that live in the States about French people. And I'm going to go back to that one town we lived in. There was definitely an attitude. I think that's why I thought this is funny.
Yeah.
Because there was a time when they were like, oh, French fries are now freedom fries for.
Oh yeah, remember that
during
the Bush era.
Exactly. So there is somehow, for whatever reason, which I don't know, there's an attitude with some people about French people. This is really true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I do think it's more male.
I actually think it's if you haven't traveled. To me, it is if you haven't traveled and experienced different cultures, that if you have not traveled out, and that's the thing with some of the smaller towns. Some people have traveled and they live there and they're just not in that whole bubble. But there's the bubble thing. And then if you haven't traveled out, you don't understand how to handle people other than, your neighbor. And so it's a fear thing. It's a not understanding thing.
Yeah.
And so then it's just like label it, boom, that's it, because now I don't know what it is and I don't want to, I don't want to know. It is kind of a weird fear thing. But people who have traveled, they don't have that problem.
No,
or if they deal with if they're in a tourism industry that meet a lot of people all the time, maybe not.
Everybody's different.
Yeah. What do you think, Suzanne?
Well, yes, and for people who have never left a county, a rural county in America, to have this French guy arrive is pretty. It is a culture clash. It was a culture clash in this particular case, but when it comes to food, I mean, there is another restaurant in this particular county where a local boy or a local young man had gone to culinary school or something and started this other restaurant. So, I mean, that was accepted by the local people. They kind of like to see a local guy make it and do well. However, the other side of the coin is, when somebody comes in elbowing their way and doing what this particular fellow did, that's crossing the line for them. So, but
okay, so I have to ask, if you could go out to dinner with one of the characters in your book.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's
who would
a really
you
good
take
question.
to dinner? And
I would have to
which
say.
Which restaurant would you go to?
What restaurant or what?
Yeah, what restaurant, and who are you taking to dinner from the characters in your book?
I would say it would be most interesting to go out with the chef, because he's a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
And entertaining, nevertheless, but definitely crazy. So it would make for a very entertaining conversation at dinner.
And which restaurant would you go to? Would you?
Since our poor protagonist restaurant is closed, we'd probably have to go to the local diner, that little place in the corner of town that's been there forever, that all the locals go to. We'd have to go there. We'd have to go for breakfast.
And everybody will know you're there.
That's what it's so funny, because that's what, when you walk into one of those places and you don't live there yet, or then you get that look up and down, that stranger among these parts.
I know, and everybody knows. Like if you've bought a new shirt, if you live there, they know. If you've bought new shoes, if you had your hair down, I know, it's cool. I love small towns, and I love living in them.
Oh,
and
that's fun. It's like she got her hair done. What's up? I
yeah,
wonder what.
She's got Nookie on the side.
The new Nookie.
Well, there's one scene where Danielle Perrault with his neighbor, when they're going to buy some cattle, they go for breakfast to one, this little local place that's in the town, and of course all the subsistence farmers and the locals are kind of standing around the coffee machine, and they're all kind of look at him, and they know who he is and they know what he's doing, but they only kind of give him a little curt nod and then turn away and start their back to their conversation. So I mean, they know exactly what he's doing, and they look at him with suspicion. That's all. They're not.
And
sure
then the
this.
next morning when they're having coffee, that's the topic of discussion. You know how men have their why do men have their coffee clubs?
They gossip more than women.
Men
that's right.
around
That's all they're talking about.
They have their coffee clubs, and they always say men don't gossip. That is baloney.
No, they're exchanging news.
Okay.
They are.
Solving the world events. But they do have coffee. I mean, there's the happy hour crowd, and then there's the coffee crowd. And men have coffee, whether it's McDonald's, a diner. There are these. It's like a tradition thing where they do it every morning. At this time, it's coffee time, and they all sit together, and it's like, are you gonna light a cigar now? But they do. They
exchange their news and their opinions. Right.
It's true.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying it's one of those things.
It's funny.
And when you're writing, don't you kind of feel that? Like you start to go, well, people kind of do this and that. You know what I mean? You have to be real about it. It is true.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's
have
wrong.
To get the picture in your mind's eye and go from there. I mean, I can see it. I know the people out here pretty well. I know how they operate and how they think. So I can get them, I can get them down on paper to a certain extent.
Lisa and I used to print our magazine in Las Vegas, and we used to go there, and you end up beating out all the time, of course, while you're waiting for your publication to actually get printed. And we used to look at different people in the casinos and around the kitchen areas and stuff, and we'd have like, okay, it's going to be 30 minutes, 45 minutes for breakfast. By the time we were done, we had a whole novel about different people that we saw in the restaurant.
That's exactly. Do you people watch like that?
I would say yes.
I know. That's the fun part. And then it's like, then we can say we're productive at it because you're writing about it. It's like, okay, we're going to actually manifest something of it. I love it. Suzanne, it has been such a pleasure having you on the show. I'm excited. So book number 3, is it crime? Is it love? Is it different?
Well, that's a good question. I'm thinking about a sequel, but I also have another idea kind of about, it has to do with somebody in old age regretting a terrible thing they did when they were younger and kind of do it that way. It could be sort of a crime. Yeah, it might be a crime novel. It's not been gelled yet. I don't have the characters yet or anything, but I'm kind of thinking along those lines. But a sequel might not be a problem.
And
might
somebody's
be a good
friends
idea.
will be in there. There'll be a French man.
Go to Las Vegas. You'll find lots of
plenty to find out there, huh?
I love it.
It's so weird.
I love it. Everyone, the book is Between a Rock and a Dark Place. And again, it's by Suzanne-Schiffman. And you can go to her website. Of course, it's on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, but just go to SuzanneSchiffman.com. She's also on Facebook. And we want to thank all of our listeners for joining us here on Big Blend Radio. We air Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and Fridays and Sundays at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And just go to bigblendradio.com. You'll see the schedule. You can listen live or on demand at one of the other podcast outlets we have. We have a lot of them. We're all over the place. So check it out. And for more author interviews, go to blendradioandtv.com. Suzanne, we have a special song for you.
Thank you. And thank you very much for having me on the show.
Thank you. We're going to play The Hills of West Virginia. It just kind of has that vibe of the book as soon as you start reading it. Just kind of feels like it. You feel that sense of place kind of deal. And we're also playing, it's by Blind Lemon Pledge, James Byfield, and Blind Lemon Pledge, and it's off of their album, Backwoods Glance. I just thought we had to do that, right?
Sounds good to me.
Because we're in the backwoods. There's nothing, you never know what happens in the backwoods.
That's right. Kind of a scary place sometimes.
The skunks and the badgers do.
And the raccoons.
They see a lot.
And they eat people's toes if they're dead on the side of the foot. Anyway, here it is. The Hills of West Virginia. And again, off of the album Backwards Glance by Blind Lemon Pledge. And you can go to blindlemon-pledge.com. Thanks so much, Suzanne.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
My brother Jeb left Saturday. Where he gone can no one say. Ain't no surprise he went away. It's so cold in the hills of West Virginia. Sister-in-law moans through the night. Her baby's bald till morning light. The way Jeb left, it wasn't right. It's so cold in the hills of West Virginia. It's cold, blowing cold. Bitter tears turn to ice in the snow. And even though coal fire is burning down below, it's so cold in the hills of West Virginia. We had us jobs in Freeman's mine, and Daddy did too in his time. The way it ended was a crime. One day we showed and the gates was locked forever. Just to survive, I was dealing lewds. But Jeb had morals, he refused. I said we can't afford that attitude. It's so cold in the hills of West Virginia. It's cold, blowing cold. Bitter tears turn to ice in the snow. And even though coal fire is burning down below, it's so cold in the hills of West Virginia. It's cold, blowing cold. Bitter tears turn to ice in the snow. And even though coal fire is burning down below, it's so cold in the hills of West Virginia. My baby's crawling across the floor. They shut my credit at the store. Don't know if I can take much more. It's so cold in the hills of West Virginia. It's so cold in the hills of West Virginia. It's so cold in the hills of West Virginia. It's so cold.